So the things that you taught me right away is that you got to make a decision and then you got to act on it. And you can't take your time. You have to leap.
Awesome. We are here today on the Unstoppable Woman podcast with a very special guest of mine. I am highlighting on this Unstoppable Woman Spotlight one of my clients, Heather Keith, who is a fabulous unstoppable woman in her own right. And the idea behind these Unstoppable Woman Spotlights is to show people through conversation, through listening, through storytelling, about what it takes to really scale a business and to scale your life. So here at the Unstoppable Woman, we don't see those things as separate. We see those things as integrated. And I think Heather is a great example of doing both concurrently and really going for it. So without further ado, Heather, can you please introduce yourself, your business, and share a little bit about where you were when you first started working with me?
Sure. Hi, Amira. It is my pleasure to be on your podcast. I'm so excited to speak with you. My name is Heather Keith, and I have a family law firm in Westfield, New Jersey. And when I first started working with you, I was just really looking to dig deep into my business and just make it blossom in ways that I really hadn't been able to do before. And I had the sneaking suspicion that it was me that was preventing that from happening. And so I reached out for help. And at the same time, little did I know that that would also cause my personal life also to blossom in similar ways. So I've just been delighted to work with you, and I've just doors have opened that I had not even anticipated. So let's
start with that. What doors have opened that you did not anticipate? I think one of the things that you came to the coaching with, which you just highlighted, which I think is super important, is that you recognize that maybe it was me, right? Maybe it was something to do with how I was showing up in this world and how I was looking at it and my belief structure. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the common denominator in me getting stuck over and over again was, there wasn't anything that I could blame it on except for something that was going on internally in myself. I just felt some kind of an urge to grow somehow, and I wasn't even able to get the clarity to see what that growth would even look like. So I felt like I was living in the middle of a big blind spot. I was working very hard. I was pulling, 80-hour weeks. I was really not getting anywhere. I mean, I wouldn't say that my business was not successful because, on paper it was, but I just didn't have that satisfaction. I didn't have the love for it. And it just, all roads kind of led back to myself. And I just felt like I was kind of stuck. I mean, I guess that's the classic way to explain it is I just felt just really, really stuck and frustrated. You can only come at that from 10 million different directions before you realize, hey, I really need somebody else to help me see what I couldn't see before. And so that is when I reached out, and I think if I had to put it in a nutshell, one of the biggest lessons that I've learned along the way, aside from, just sort of being able to see things a little bit better, is that not only did I need to see things better, but I also had to take that little bit of action. I could read all the books, and I could listen to all the podcasts, and I could go to all the events and everything, but nothing was happening for me. And I just didn't connect that to the fact that I needed to take an action to prove to myself that even just the littlest bit was possible. And so I think that's one of the first thing that you and I tackled was, it's something that you said stuck in my mind from the very beginning, and that is closing the gap on time. And at the time I'm still in the same year. So I turned 50 this year. I freely admit that, admit that with pride. Because, it just really clicked a switch in me that says, hey, you know what, Heather, you really just don't have all the time left in the world. I have got a young son that's coming up in the world, and I just had so many things I just really wanted to do. And so, but I was just stuck in inaction. So the things that you taught me right away, right away, is that you got to make a decision and then you got to act on it. And you can't take your time. You have to leap. You have to just take that idea and just jump off the cliff and just in faith that it's going to happen for you. Would you,
Okay,
would you
so
say that?
let's talk about that. It's so important. And it's one of the things that I coach almost every single client on. I can't right now think of someone who I haven't coached on that,
Right.
Because it's one of the ways I think we've been brought up is to overthink, and it's a delaying tactic, and we put it in the realm of research or methodicalness or making a good decision or not being rash, when in fact it can often be a self-sabotaging issue for people. So why don't you give two examples? One like large action that you took that closed the gap on time, and what about like a small, because we've worked on the big things and then we've worked on the small daily things as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, to be honest, I have said, I mean, I've, from my perspective, the way I'm thinking of it is, the way I think of it is saying yes. All right. So the biggest thing that I said yes to was, in fact, working with you. That was a huge yes. And I did it the same day. I said yes to you, and I went online and booked my plane tickets the same day for a meeting with you. I think it was like 5 days from the day that we spoke. At that moment, I didn't do that. That just wasn't anything that I would ever like. Are you out of your mind? I was like, well, maybe I am, but I'll tell you what, nothing has worked up until now, and I'm ready. So this is the big, like, talk about closing the gap on time. At that moment, like, even just thinking about it, my heart is kind of pounding. Just thinking about what that felt like to click the button on buying a really nice plane ticket to come and see you, and having it just happen so quickly. I thought to myself, holy mackerel, like, if I can do this quickly, like, what else is there out there that I'm over analyzing, that I'm slowing myself down by over researching, because like researching feels like action, but what I have learned is it ain't action. It really ain't. It's not. It really, don't get me wrong. You need to collect some facts. Like, we're not just jumping off the edge of the world here. But I guess what I'm saying is that just with a little bit of information, it feels like jumping. You just close that gap on time and say yes, and then take the action right that minute, right in that moment, if possible, to just do it. So that's the biggest one I can think of.
It's a big one, and you lead for sure. So speak a little bit to a couple of things there, and then we'll go back to a small close the gap activity. Okay. But I think that what got to happen for you as a result of coming down to visit me in Charlotte for a VIP day, right? Like, you said yes, my schedule was open, we booked it immediately.
Yeah.
We got on that plane.
Yeah.
And in perfect transparency to everyone who's listening, Heather and I had 2-3 conversations prior to her saying yes. So she, although some people say yes initially, she had to get herself to that place. But then once she said yes, she was like, okay, I want to do this now. Let's go. Let's not allow any space for the noise to come in.
Yeah, well, I had a taste of it. I got that taste of what could possibly be possible. And I thought, oh my God, like, this is exactly what I'm looking for. This is this momentum, this, like, it didn't feel wrong. It felt like exactly what was supposed to, how can I say it? It just felt like exactly what was supposed to happen for me at that moment. And I was getting in my own way. And the way I was getting in my own way was by saying no to myself. I knew what I was supposed to do. I knew what I needed to do. And I knew it would be scary. And I knew, all these things. And I had, up until that moment, said no Yep. Nope. Yep. That's right. That's going to be scary. So we're not going to do that. Oh, yep. That's going to be expensive. Okay. Yep. So that's a good reason not to do that. So no, 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 over and over and over again. And I said yes. And my brain just like lit up. I was like, wow, you just said yes to yourself. It was one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had in my life. And it was just like an internal, like I said yes to something. And in that moment, like a whole lot of things just aligned right up. And I will never forget that. And in that moment, I just, you talk about promises that you make to yourself and little, contracts that you make with yourself. I made an agreement. I made an agreement with myself that I was like, I want more of that. Whatever that is, I want more of it because it just felt so real to me.
I love it. I love it. So talk a little bit about what came out of that VIP day and because there were some fast action things on that. Yeah. There were some financial positivity on that. And then let's talk about how you've continued to close the gap on time, because that's when you said, I want more of that. Yeah. Like, let's talk about what more of that is. Yeah.
What's that? Well, it's life. It's nothing short. It's nothing less and nothing more. That's what it is. It's just more of what it is that I'm supposed to be here to do. At the VIP, like we jammed into that one session. We jammed so much. Like I could have been in therapy for 20 years on that. It just was something that we just got right to it. I mean, I say we because there's no way I could have done that on my own. I really needed a Sherpa for that. I'm so grateful for that moment. I mean, we discovered some hidden agreements. We discovered some double binds. We discovered some things that had to do with a very important relationship in my life that I didn't even see. I was looking in a totally different direction. And when we came down to that very core relationship with a very important person in my life, it's like the scales were lifted. I was just like, oh, okay. And I was so grateful to be in that moment with you at that time because I wouldn't have known what to do with that. I would not have known what to do with that revelation. But what we were able to do was, and if I'm remembering this right, I mean, it was a kind of a big moment. What do you replace that with? Right. And so nature abhors a vacuum. And what we replace that with is what I want to be. Like, what kind of a person do I really want to be? What fills that gap? Where are we going for this? Not the self-image part, but the part where we're going in the future is what what started to fill in. And in that day, just like the chasm sort of opened on that. And then I looked at it and said, this is not what I want. And now I understand what I'm looking at. But now that we've carved that piece of it away, what is now going to fill into that spot? What goes into that spot? And that's where the real creativity started to happen, because I was like, oh my gosh, look at all the space I have. Like I'm like essentially like I've got like probably 45, 50, 60% of myself I could just fill, or more, that I could just fill with whatever I want. And it's okay for me to want things. What is that? Like, that was a completely that was a sensation I hadn't experienced since I was probably in preschool. I mean, this goes way back. And since then, that just really planted, I mean, to say that it planted a seed is kind of an understatement. It's planted an acorn, because since then I'm like, oh my gosh, like there are so many things. There's just so much. And it just kind of grows out from there. And then we did get to a financial piece of it. And I hit the biggest terror barrier that I had probably experienced in probably my life, I guess. There were two big moments. One, saying yes to you to begin with was one big one. And then saying yes at VIP to something that I desperately wanted, that I knew I needed it. And there was a big terror barrier between where I was at that moment and where I just really needed to be. And I hit it. I hit it pretty hard. The tears came. The terror was real. And you stayed with me in that container, in that safe place. And I managed to push through it. And I kind of reached to the other side and grabbed it and pulled it back with me. And yes, I have the finances are there, but it's not, I didn't die. And now I have something that I value more than that. I'm now have something that I value more than what I sacrificed to get to where I'm going, which I couldn't have seen at the moment. It was yet another leap of faith. But I think that's what terror barriers are kind of about. You get up to something that seems like it's going to, like you really feel it. Like I really felt it in my body. Heather, you're about to die. If you say yes to this, you can kiss everything that you've worked for goodbye. You're done.
Yep.
And then there was a little teeny tiny voice in me that said, well, are we really sure about that? Is that really completely true? By the way, does that need to be true? Could you change that story that you're telling yourself? Is it possible? And I saw a little crack. A little light came through, a little crack. And I thought, you know what? Here I am, and this is what I'm here for. I'm saying yes. We're going for it. Done.
And that's one of the biggest things that I see in you, Heather, is that as a transformation that I think happened in that first yes to the VIP day, but is consistent now. It's like you see, now you, like in that VIP day, that terror barrier that came up, you saw this little sliver of light, held space for you. We worked through it and you claimed it and you didn't die. And you had that experience of not dying.
Yes.
And then you kept that process up. Every time you hit a wall, you looked for the light. You kept that questioning. One of the things I love about the way you have engaged in this particular coaching style and process that I share, I teach, I work with, is that you are intellectually engaging with it. So you keep asking yourself questions like, well, what if that wasn't true? What if that was just a story that I was telling myself? What if, and you find the light, right? And then you're like, that feels like light. That feels like dark. I'm going with the light because over here, this feels like terror. Why would I move? Why would I stay in that? Even though all the cells in your body know it as, comfort, if you will, like what is known. Yeah. The terror doesn't, but staying where you are feels comfortable. You consistently go look for the light and you go find it. So I love that. So just wrapping up on the VIP day. You had your biggest month ever the next month.
Yeah.
Financially. Like I like to connect the dots for people on the financial side of things because women come to me for both scaling up their business and this concept of self-ownership, personal freedom, really being the person that they want to be and not feeling so internally trapped with the internal sabotages and frustrations and things like that. And you've spoken a lot about like the freedom side of things and like, oh yeah. And the financial side was pretty good too. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's true. I did have a really big month after that. And I think I would have looked at that a lot differently in the past. First, I would have thought about that like, oh, well, that's somebody else did that. It wasn't me. I'm not claiming that. After VIP, I was like, you know what? Yeah, did that.
You totally did that.
Did that.
With relative ease also, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it involves asking. Asking had been a dangerous proposition. And that has changed over time. The asking part of it was like, oh, well, if from where my background, where I came from, if you ask for something, you're not going to get it.
So specifically, are we talking about sales, asking in a sales conversation? Yeah.
Asking for sales. Yep. And also asking for accounts receivable also is an issue. Right. So in my business, we're working through that. But right now, also, if I had been working with you to build my business from the beginning, we wouldn't have had accounts receivable because that's a toleration, right? That's a toleration. And that's also, that's sort of a language to the universe that you don't value yourself.
Correct. I
think. So, the fact that I had that I have to go back and ask people to, God forbid, pay me for the work that I've already done for them. The fact that even existed in the first place, that was a bucket in my business was weird. It doesn't speak to what we're working on here, which is, more life, like more respect, and all the universal laws too, by the way, which is, you provide value and laws of compensation and so forth. So it was very interesting to step up and claim all that, just claim all that. I didn't feel like I had claimed hardly anything in my adult life, but just to start claiming things is just like, it's a remarkable feeling to claim anything, to claim the dress that you want, to claim the haircut that you want to try, to claim some money that somebody owes you, to claim a new client, to claim, a potential client who wants to work with you, to claim that part you claim your part in the universe, really, at the end of the day. So that was something that I really hadn't done up until then. So that's changed for me a lot.
That's huge. And a reflection there for you and for our listeners. Here's this woman, she runs a very successful law firm. From all intents and purposes, the outside world, you even said this in some conversation to me that, everyone sees me from the outside looking in as successful, but I don't feel successful on the inside. So here's this woman who has a law firm, is running a business, is doing fairly well. Yes, she needs to, clean things up in her systems and, scale it and grow it and all of that. But she didn't feel internally like she could claim anything. Yeah. And yet she had this business already. So I think that's a really important thing for people to see for themselves. You can have much of the outer side of success and still not feel successful because internally you don't understand, you don't have a sense of self-worth or a sense of personal ownership or self-ownership or really being able to claim what you want in this world, like take up space and be you.
Oh, yeah.
Full self-expression.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah. So, if I can say, the firm that I'm running is a 6-figure firm, and it was when we started working. Now it's more of a 6-figure firm, but this is not a small thing. But you're completely right.
And that month, can I toot your horn for a second? That month after the VIP day, she got to a month that would put her on track for a 7-figure law firm. Okay.
That's correct. Yes.
And we're working on and creating that consistently now. But that was a big leap, and it was fantastic. Okay.
Yeah. It was an amazing experience. And what it taught me was that, first off, it's possible. This is again with the new experiences and teaching at least my brain that these things are even possible. That you claim something and it comes to you. It doesn't go away from you. It actually comes to you. So, just this whole theme about claiming has just been, it's been just remarkable. It's been real, up until then, I didn't trust myself at all. I didn't trust myself. I just didn't. I'm a high performer. I'm not like an achiever, a super duper. I guess if you looked at me from the outside, you say that maybe I am, but I don't perceive myself that way. But whatever I do, I tend to like really kind of do. But internally, there was a lot of incongruity there, and I just didn't trust myself. There wasn't anything and I didn't really know how to build.
How did that show up, Heather? Can you give people an example? Because I think sometimes you and I talk and we have this language of understanding, because I know I'm in your life, I'm in your business, and I know exactly what you're talking about. But what was the outer result of not trusting yourself? How would that show up?
Well, how would that show? Well, I don't know. Unless you knew what you were looking for, I don't know if you'd be able to see it. I guess it shows up in the results. I guess to me, it was just a pervasive feeling of like, oh, I can't do this. So let's see, we're trying to get through COVID. So we have to pivot and make sure that our businesses keep running instead of folding or whatever. and there are certain things that you need to do to make sure that that happens. And there were certain things that I just wasn't, I just didn't trust myself to do it. One of the ways that it manifests is that for me is that like my deadlines will get pushed out, pushed out, pushed out, pushed out, pushed out. It kind of looks like procrastination, but really what it is for me is that I don't trust myself to do that job out of the park. You know, if I knew I was going to do it like completely well, I probably would just sit down and do it. But as it is, sometimes I'll sit down to do something, and it will just kind of ooze out into the future. Like I'm not really doing it. I'm afraid to engage in it. When I do it, I have learned that I have the capacity to engage and have something happen really quickly. And however, what I had taught myself was, A, you're not good enough. So B, if you start on a project, it better be 100,000% over the top, 200% good, or else it's not going to be good enough either. And over and over again, I just had that cycle where it's just not good enough, not good enough, not good enough. And by extension, then of course, I'm not good enough. And that was the message I was giving myself over and over and over, like on a daily basis, on everything, on every level that I can just really think of. It's, I think about it now and it's like, wow, that's kind of depressing.
So let's talk about the after story on that, because now, like, I'm going to fill in some of the blanks here. So one of the things that Heather and I worked on was like how she was showing up with team and how she was showing up on her calendar and how she was dealing with managing her time, all sorts of sort of self-management aspects that come into play when you're running your own business and you don't have, boss man looking down on your shoulders. Like you have to have self-agency here. And she is someone who is a doer and is, obviously successful in her own right before we started working together. But she was very much delaying, closing on, making decisions, closing on things, and taking action because she had a sense of not being right, being wrong, and therefore not trusting herself. Yeah. And so what does the flip side of that look like? What does self-ownership or self-trust look like on the daily now? Maybe you can talk about how you close the gap on time now, and we can circle back to that point that we started with.
Well, first of all, it's like a special, circle of Hades to be in that loop, where, I didn't feel like I had agency, like you say, and I wasn't managing myself at all. I just really wasn't. Just, some of the things that you said just kind of brought some things up for me. So yeah, I wasn't managing my calendar. I wasn't really managing anything. And again, I was teaching myself over and over again, you're not reliable. You're not reliable. Well, that's a complete lie, by the way. This is all lies. These are all lies, by the way. Lies. They're lies. I'll say it again. They're a lie. If you're out here, listen to me. It's all lies. It's all lies. We are good enough and we are capable. And whatever it is that my subconscious was telling me to keep me back in safety zone, as it were, for God's sake, don't achieve anything that's like, outstanding or just achieve anything in any case. It's just like, it wasn't an option. Like, stay where you are, it's all good. It's all good where you are. It's all good. Don't do anything, that will move yourself forward. And, I couldn't, decide my way out of a wet paper bag. I just couldn't do it. And it's because I didn't trust myself. And the only way that I got over that was I made a decision and I took a little action. And it wasn't even a huge action, just a little action. So to decide is okay to do. To decide is okay. What I would do sometimes is I would decide and then I would go off and do something else. I was just make a decision.
That's not a decision.
Yeah,
that's not a decision. Right?
Yeah, I guess not.
That's a wish. That's a hope. That's an intention. Yes. Yeah, it's a big difference. Okay.
So I wasn't okay. So to your point, I wasn't deciding. That's an even more clear way to put it. I wasn't deciding at all. I wasn't deciding. I was saying, oh, geez, I'm going to do that. And then I would go off and do something different. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm going to do this by the end of the day. And then I would go off and do something else. I would say, oh, okay, this is a project. I'm going to do that before noon. But first, let me just check my email. I think everybody does it, but I was just getting so tired of it. It was so destructive. It was just holding me back so much. And the only cure that I have found for that is to just make the decision and then act on that decision in that moment.
Right.
Just send the email, pick up the phone and make the call, write the thank you note, have the conversation, make the list, whatever it is that you're thinking of in that moment. When you make, at least for me, when you make that decision, act on it somehow. And better yet, act on it as much as you can. Make a step towards that, because what it does is it brings it kind of into reality at that point. You have not only decided, but you've committed now. In real life, in real time, you've committed to having that thing happen. And what happens is it sets a whole bunch of stuff into motion. And before you know it, your intent comes back to you in the form of a result. And then, holy mackerel, you've done something. You've created something in the world. It comes back to you, some kind of result that you want. And then the feeling of that is like, wow, I've participated in the universe. I've put my stuff out there. I wanted something to happen, and it comes back, and it happened. And all of a sudden I trust myself. And it's just one little piece at a time. Like for me, it was like baby muscles. I just had to start real small. Like, oh, I'm going to make my own breakfast this morning. Okay. So I'm actually, the moment I had that thought, I had to march myself into the kitchen and get out the blender and all the stuff that I do and make my smoothie or whatever and drink it. And that's what I had to do. It couldn't just be like, oh, this morning I'm going to get my breakfast. And so, but first I'm going to give Rex a bath, and then I'm going to get dressed and this and that. So I think it's
one of the things that I'm seeing there also is that not only are you thought, idea, decision, action, but this is also a act of self-worth at all phases. And like you're learning, there's that old adage, put your oxygen mask on first, right?
Yeah.
And we all think that, but then we put everyone else first, right?
Yes.
And that happens in family life, and that happens in business also, where, people will put content development or management there when they really need to be doing sales, or they really need to be doing client work, or there's something. Every business and individual is different, but there is a move the needle action that is your priority for you and your business. And it's not that the other stuff doesn't get done. It's not like you don't take care of your son. You've just switched, that you've made these micro decisions that actually add up. It's this like 2% shift that then makes a huge difference, because you then believe in yourself. You've said you're going to do something, and you go do it, and you don't undermine your trust with yourself. So then you become a trustworthy person, and you can be trustworthy for everyone in your life.
That's right.
And it builds this internal momentum that is, instead of an energy sap, like, oh, I said I was going to do that and I didn't do that. And it's in you. You feel it, right? You took care of your son, or you took care of the team member, but you're in your head going, I didn't do that thing. I didn't do that thing. I didn't do that thing.
Right.
And then your sense of self just drops that much more, and that lowers your momentum. And so you're on an upward cycle with this, which is fantastic. Love that.
Yeah. 100%. In fact, it's painful for me now to undermine myself. It used to be the norm. And now when I start doing that, I'm like, oh God, like, no, that can't happen. This is the wrong direction. We're not doing that anymore. No more. It has to be positive. It has to be in a positive direction. How else can you really step into the world? I mean, how else? There's just no other way. I don't know what it looks like in the future. I don't know. I'm not like I'm not one of those super planners that has like my 3-year plan. I'll get there someday. But really, generally, I like to experience the world like on a moment by moment basis. But when you start doing that undermining stuff, wow, it really just takes you out of that experience entirely. It's like you're not even living anymore. It's like you're just hurting yourself over and over again. And that was my experience of it. Like that's how it felt in my body, and I didn't realize that. So now that I've been able to sort of tip that in a different direction, now it's actually it's a lot more painful to do that because I'm like, whoa, 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 that's like a slippery slope. Like, we're not doing that. No, 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 no. We're not doing that. Find something else to do. We're not doing that anymore.
So
So
you
that's been
said
huge.
something this morning that I think is pertinent to this, Heather. So Heather is someone who is doing lots of different coaching programs with me. She did a VIP day program to start. Then she stepped into private coaching for a year. She's doing something now called the Immersion program, which is, I don't need to go into all the details, but it's fabulous.
Yep.
And if you're interested, please, ring me up, find me. But we speak every morning, Monday through Friday, for a very short window. And it's an immersion so that she can really flip the switch very quickly. And she said something to me this morning that was, my little dog ears went up around it. You said you were having a conversation with someone and you reflected to me, the way I showed up in that conversation is not who I am anymore. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not how I'm showing up in my conversations with you, in my business, but over here, I'm my old me.
Yeah.
And that was so palpable. Like, I think what you said that brought that up for me was when you said it's painful to do it any other way now. And that was like a painful experience for you, like to see yourself not working at this higher level, if you will. Mm-hmm. You want to speak to that a little bit?
Well, I mean, it's enough to make you cry. It's a powerful transformation, I guess, is what I would say. You do reach that tipping point where there are certain things that are just not acceptable to you anymore. However, this is a very old relationship that we're talking about. This is somebody that I've known for decades, and to focus in the coaching in a certain way, and to focus, you and I focused in the coaching in a certain way, and in the business in a certain way, and strides are being made, and I feel like I'm repairing myself in some ways, and just really like ramping it up and tipping that tipping point to a positive way, and then I go back to an old relationship, and I had an assignment and I was executing on the assignment with this person. And I just heard myself saying all those old things and thinking on the old. And this is just, by the way, just goes to show you the insidiousness of your subconscious and all the program that you've got and all the patterns that are in there. And even the patterns that are, I don't know if it's conscious or not, but in any case, in that situation, I just felt like I just watched myself just go right back in. The most important thing for me in that moment was to be able to see it from a different perspective. Like, I didn't feel like I was in that place. I felt like I was in another place, watching myself act as I used to act, and having those kind of feelings and emotions sort of coming back that were they were painful to me at the time, but I didn't know it. Now I know that that's not the way to go about it. That's not the way, anyway, that I want to go about it. And just to see myself act that way, even for just the 10 or 15 or 20 minutes that it was occurring, I thought, my God, like, whoa. I thought, wow, like, okay, all right, fair enough. Here's another area that needs to be worked on. But it was just, I couldn't have seen it much clearer, I don't think, than I did at that time. But of course, there was a time a little while ago, I wouldn't have been able to see the forest for the trees. But now, I mean, I am operating in a different place and showing up habitually in, say, about 2/3 of my life, and having this other third lagging behind just brought it out in such relief, like in high relief. I saw it all of a sudden. I was like, oh my goodness, like, holy moly, like, that is not the way to go about it. This is not what we're doing anymore. And I just felt it in my body. And it was just a really powerful experience. And now, of course, I have to figure out what to do with it. And I think I know what to do with it, but this is all a process.
Absolutely. So the big thing, well, many big things there, but another big thing to affirm and underscore there is something you said earlier, where you would have, when we were talking about self-trust, you would have made yourself wrong about the situation.
Yes.
The level of awareness that you're at now, you're able to see this. Look, I'm behaving in a way that's the old me. That's not who I know myself to be now, who I've stepped into, this person who's more fully expressed, has self-ownership, has a sense of freedom, agency in her life.
Right.
Oh, look at that. But you didn't make yourself wrong about it.
Yeah,
Right?
that was like a magic moment for me. I was like, I am not in this. I am looking at this more or less, can we say objectively? Like there was an objectivity to it. I didn't belong to that moment, and I didn't beat myself up about it either. I looked at it like, okay, this is a situation here. Like, oh wow, this is an interesting experience. Again, we're not doing this anymore. So now I have to go into problem solving mode. I need to look at that, see what I think is needs to be changed about, like, how do I change my behavior? How do I change my actions? How do I change the way I look at this? How do I, like, went right into problem solving around it rather than saying like, oh my goodness, like, oh geez, this is awful, this is terrible. And I don't even remember what I used to think, but it wasn't good. And it certainly wasn't solving any problems.
I think that's the most amazing part of this kind of work, is that we don't actually remember how we used to be. It's like, it's so,
works for me.
yeah,
I'm okay with
and
that.
it's phenomenal. I mean, you know that it was painful, you know that it was different, but you don't actually know your old.
Well,
you're
I
not
don't.
in it.
Yeah, you don't operate that way anymore. Like
Yeah, the
your
operating systems has changed.
exactly, like your brain has actually, like, brains are plastic, so you have actually managed. I mean, I guess this is the proof to myself that I have actually managed to change the way I'm thinking about things. It's
So
cool.
I love that, Heather. I love
It's
that.
great.
It makes me so proud and happy for you. I want to wrap with a little bit more of the business side of things,
Okay.
and connecting the dots on this, because from my perspective, the internal work that we do, the personal growth work, has an absolute specific direct result in the business side of things. And so let's talk about two places where I think this has really shown up for you. And you can speak to it in however you'd like. But I think around team has been a big shift, both in terms of the visibility stuff with the marketing and the marketing coaching that you were getting on that, and your initial reaction to it and your current reaction to it are completely different. And then also how you approached working with your bookkeeper and accountant and that situation.
Well,
Can you hear my dog barking?
I sure can. You little cutie pie.
Yeah.
Okay, so here again, it's kind of hard to remember because we're in such a different place right now. But yeah, when I started thinking about marketing, I deliberately was pushing myself pretty hard, and I was scared to death. I did not want to be seen. I figured I had nothing to say. No one would listen to me. It wouldn't work, and all this stuff. And so the thing that I can think of that happened for me is I enrolled myself in a video tutorial program. And I was scared to death. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I just did it. And it turns out that, I didn't die, and I have some good marketing videos now that can be used. And
But initially you felt like you were going to die.
I thought I was going to die on that one. And then there was the other thing that I had an interview set up with somebody who I was, that's what you're thinking about. Yeah. So I had an interview set up. Yeah, this is super triggering. So I had an interview, again, with the sort of jumping off the cliff to be sure that, to prove to myself that nobody dies. There was an offer that came out that a certain person was available to be interviewed. And this is a pretty big person. It's a pretty big person in my sort of sphere of influence, if you will. And I knew this person, like, generally was not available, probably would have cost a lot of money to get this interview with this person. But for this particular occasion, the offer was made to make this person available for a big, long interview, like a long interview, like kind of like the one we're having now, which you're experienced at, but I certainly wasn't. And so I put together the script, and I had it all kind of worked out and everything. And I had my notes, and it was a video. It wasn't an audio. It was video. It was a Zoom recording. And I had it all. I was very nervous about it, and I had it all spread out and everything. And I had my sheets, and I had a plan, and I had it all worked out and everything. And this person got on, and instead of saying, "Oh, hi, my name is such and let me introduce and let's just go ahead and start recording," the person that I was interviewing, who had like, I don't know how to explain this, but he had a reason to say the things that he was saying, promptly ripped apart my whole thing. He just ripped it. Says basically, "You're doing it wrong. Let me show you how to do it." And I was like, I started sweating, like forget the hair dry, forget all that. I mean, oh my gosh. And I just kind of went over the edge on it. And I really wasn't very happy. And I just sort of, I powered through it. And I did get it. I did get it done. But I was powerfully triggered by that because I had put myself out there. I was scared to begin with. My expectation in my little kid brain, I guess, was that this person was going to be nice to me because this person knows it was my first time doing something like this. But that is exactly the opposite of what happened. And I really felt it in the moment. So
let me pause there. Let me give when she says she really felt it in the moment, she is super triggered. Okay. Yeah. Like it was intense. It was in her body. Yeah. You wanted to make a customer service complaint.
Yeah.
So wrong. He treated me like this whole, look at how you're cringing still.
Yeah. It was terrible.
It was really intense for you.
It was.
And so she moved through that. Mm-hmm. And now the after, can you just go to the after? Now you're engaged with this process. And I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'll let you speak and then I'll give my reflection on it. Because to me, it's like a 180.
Uh-huh. Well, I don't, all I remember after that is that, maybe I'm not remembering what it is that you're thinking about.
Well, you shared with me that subsequent to that, mm-hmm. there were other opportunities. You raised your hand. You were like, I have a growth mindset. Please give me the feedback. I want to know. I want to learn. Versus in that first situation, you were like, he's making me wrong. I've done something wrong. I'm triggered. I need to defend myself. I need to blame fingers at the other person. Mm-hmm. And you completely stepped out of that right-wrong dynamic, victim, persecutor dynamic, and went directly into, I'm here to learn, growth mindset. I don't understand how this works now, but I know I'm not essentially wrong. I know I need to learn and I'm going to step forward and tell me anything, bring it on. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
Does that sound familiar now?
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah. I mean, it's just that was a very powerful, terrifying moment for me. And it took, I have to say, a lot for me not to fall into, blaming and how could this person do this to me and da 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 da. And then I just pulled it together as hard as I could. And I said, this is not what I'm here for. I am not here to play the victim or to be blaming anybody or anything like this. I am here to learn. And this experience did, by the way, teach me a lot. I could use a lot of words to say that, but it taught me a lot. I got more than I bargained for out of that experience. If he had been nice to me and then later on had been like, well, let me give you a couple of pointers, it would not have been anywhere near the experience that it was. But it really took a lot of energy and a lot of focus to take that, that experience was more of an intense, it was more of a learning experience than I ever expected it to be. If it had gone well, it wouldn't have been a good learning, as good of learning experience as it was. So I just took it and just turned, I just grabbed it by the horns and just turned it around and said, you will serve me. This experience will serve me. I'm not going down on this experience. Yes, I was totally afraid, but at the end of the day, I did learn a lot. And it wasn't, nobody died. And I did learn a tremendous amount by going through that experience.
And this is the power of perspective. Yeah. And, you can make this as good as you want or as bad as you don't want. And we had a very pivotal conversation about okay, what is your perspective going to be here? Who are you going to be in response to this? Because it's in these little micro decisions about like, here's this experience, and then how am I going to respond? I actually have choice in this moment, and I get to choose who I want to be. And Heather, you chose who you wanted to be in that moment, and you haven't gone back from that. It was such a pivotal moment, right? It's like, oh, I get to be someone who sees this as a learning opportunity, as growth, as someone supporting me, as someone fighting for my for my interests, right? Like everything he was sharing and coaching you on was for you, not against you. And that was like a huge perspective shift.
Right. The epiphany for me was just to stop, like full stop. Okay. As a starting point, just stop, pause. As a starting point, we're not blaming. We're not playing victim. We're not doing any of these things. Now, what's the alternative? How else can this be looked at? Did he want to sink me? No, he wasn't. That's not what he was there for. Did he want to be like an a-hole? I don't know, but that's neither here nor there. But I don't think that he was trying to hurt me. So I had to come up with another narrative. I had to come up with another way to look at that. And so stopping is the first step, if you will, at least for me, is I have to stop that behavior right now. And then in the silence that follows, how am I going to look at this to where, first of all, it makes more sense to me? Like, I know this person wasn't trying to hurt me. So now how am I going to look at this in a way that benefits me and him also? Because it doesn't do me any good to call customer service and say this guy was a jerk to me. Like, at first he might have been, but everybody knows that. So it wouldn't have been news to anybody. Anyway, so, but the stopping was really important for me because, that's a downhill slope right there.
Right. It was a pattern interrupt.
Yes.
You were in a habitual condition programming. When I feel uncertain, when I feel like there's criticism, right? The pattern is I get criticized. There's someone says I haven't done it perfectly. I take that as a criticism that cuts to my core instead of constructive feedback, for instance. And that is an old, deep core pattern in terms of how many of us were raised. And that pattern interrupt allowed you to, so I'm going to connect the dots with some things that you said earlier, allowed you to show up differently, take a different action, right? There's this vacuum there. Nature abhors a vacuum. You filled it with a different way of being and different action that you took. And look at that. You became a different person. You didn't die. Yep. And then you've gone to that next level of beingness or awareness, and you get to really, work at this new level, and you never go back,
Right. Yeah. Right. And the second epiphany that was right after that was like, my God, if I have this space that I need to fill, I can make a choice.
Ding.
I can choose things to put in there. I can choose to say, okay, yeah, he's a jerk and I hate him or whatever. Or I can choose something better. I can choose like, wow, that was an intense experience. Let's take a look at that and see what I learned. I'm pretty sure that was the intent from the other side to begin with, So it's like you stop, you observe the silence, and then that moment to choose was, we would talk about muscles that we build, and the muscle of choice is a big one too.
It's your greatest power,
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that came through in that second example that I gave you. I think there's a that I wanted you to speak to, which was around how you were working with some of the people on your team. If you're able to shift, if you're willing to speak about some of that, I think that the connecting dot for me is, instead of making the other person wrong, you chose to show up differently in the situation, and it created a completely different outcome. So do you want me to do any lead up to that, or do you want to just?
Well, So, we're in my business, we're evaluating a lot of things, and we're constantly evaluating things. And one of the things that came into the spotlight was the bookkeeper. Now, she's a remote bookkeeper. She's been with me for a little bit over a year. And when I went into, I'm working with some business a coaching program that's specifically for law firms, and we go through things systematically. We look at this, and then we look at this, and then we look at this, and we look at this, and so it came time for the bookkeeper. So we looked at the bookkeeper, and there were just gaps. So there was this big to do. They're like, oh my gosh, this isn't happening and this isn't happening. And who is this bookkeeper anyway? And maybe we should have an audit and this and that and the other thing. And I was like, whoa, that was disproportional, but maybe they're right. Okay, so let's take a look. So I looked into this one issue, and it was turned out to be fine. And then they just had like a litany of things that they didn't like in their audit of what my bookkeeper was doing. I didn't know enough to have the same complaints. And so it would have been really easy just to bandwagon on what they were saying and say, oh yeah, my bookkeeper stinks. I need a new bookkeeper. But I thought, you know what? I don't work with like cruddy people. Again, I created a space. I stopped and I created a space, and I thought, you know what? Is it possible that I haven't given her, the bookkeeper, enough information for her to perform like my auditor people are wanting her to perform? Is there any way that I have contributed to this problem? It would have been much easier in some ways and much more difficult in other ways now that I have this different perspective. But it would have been simpler but wrong just to say, oh, she's doing this and she's not doing that, and she's late on this and she's not doing that, and look at this column is all wrong and this adds up and this is not what we're looking for. But instead, I said, okay, I hear you. Thank you for that. Now let's just take a moment and find out, in fairness, right? In fairness, let's find out if there was anything that I had done to contribute to these gaps rather than avoid the problem or blame it on somebody else, or is there anything that I could have done better? Or is there anything missing? And lo and behold, we looked into it, and there were things that we weren't giving to her that would have made her able to do the things that the auditors had wanted to do. And there was miscommunication as between me and a team member of mine and the bookkeeper. And there were gaps in there, and there were things that had been communicated one way that the auditors wished had been communicated another way. But as it was, like, in other words, we found all kinds of gaps in there in our systems, like in our firm, right? Between me and my staff member and the bookkeeper. So we fixed them.
Yeah.
Instead of firing the bookkeeper, we fixed them.
Right.
Yeah.
And the thing here that I would like to point out is that I saw in this experience initially, like, I want to throw the baby out with bathwater, right? Like, let's move on, right? That's the most expedient. And you really did do that process where you stopped and you took personal responsibility instead of abdicating or becoming a victim. Like, she did this to me and she's not good. And blah, blah, blah. You took a little bit of that space for yourself, and you asked a question. You had a conversation with her, and she in an undefended way, in an open way, which is a very different, not that I thought you were defensive before or anything like that, but like, your level of ownership and confidence in your communication with your team has just dramatically shifted. And what happens? Well, as a result, you're not onboarding another person, right? Like, that's a lot of effort, and you're not trying to find someone else. And this closes the gap and creates a better system. And it's not that the system didn't have to change. It did. Something had to be done differently. Yeah. But you were able to approach it in a way that wasn't at counter purposes to your ultimate higher level goal, which
It's it's that moment of self-ownership. It's that moment when you take ownership of at least what your contribution to something could be. It's like you say, it would have been so expedient just to be like, oh, I have this perfect excuse. I don't have to look at any of this stuff. I just have to look at these other people over here. They say like, oh, like you say, throw the baby out with the bathwater and start all over again. But it really didn't feel right. I will absolutely confess that is exactly what I wanted to do at the first. I was like, oh, this is great. Let's get rid of her. That way I don't have to deal with the problem. And I was like, no, 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 no.
Right.
It's not really a real solution. But just that moment when for me anyway, it's a trust issue. I never trusted myself enough to say, oh, I could maybe take responsibility for some of this. I was always
you
afraid.
couldn't trust yourself enough to have the conversation, get the feedback from the person who might be saying, hey, Heather, you dropped the ball here, or we don't have a system here, or you told me to do it like this. And I right, like all of those things are perfectly natural things that come up in conversation when you're problem solving and trying to create better systems. Mm-hmm. But if you don't trust yourself, if you have a core wound that says, I'm wrong and
not worthy, like, I'm wrong.
Yeah. Right. Like I'm deficient at some core level, mm-hmm. and you don't want then you're afraid of anything that might signify that.
Yes.
You're just going to be at counter purposes. And there is like fundamental, like financial implications to that for your business. Oh, yeah. It's a whole lot of time and energy to find a new bookkeeper and onboard them. And there's not that doesn't need to happen sometimes, right?
No, but you've also undermined yourself in the process, and that is expensive.
Yes.
That is expensive, and it goes everywhere.
Totally.
If you undermine yourself, that is like a global cost. Yeah. If you cannot do that, it's a global asset. If you can trust yourself a little bit more, you will make better decisions and deal with things more. And I think the businesses will just explode in vitality and everything. But it starts with the person who's at the top, who's running the whole thing.
Absolutely. So we've talked for an hour now. I can't believe it.
Can you believe it?
I started this behind the scenes with the editor saying we could probably talk for forever.
Yeah.
And now's the time for us to wrap it up. So is there anything that you would like to leave our listeners with? Any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
Well, we've covered a lot of ground. I really think we have. And, I think the listeners, if you just kind of listen to this kind of a couple of times, it might be helpful. There's some really good concepts in here. Start small. If you can't start, you need to start big in some ways. Like you do need a stretch goal to keep yourself focused. But on the daily, start small. Don't think that you have to you will take over the world at some point, but don't think that you need to take over the world right this minute. And the other thing that I would say, because these are muscles, like this is new stuff that's gonna, you're gonna have to shed some old stuff and you're gonna have to take on some new stuff, and it's gonna be fun, but it'll be a little scary, but it'll be fun. It's totally worth it. And also, I just want to say another word about closing the gap on time. It has made my life so much easier. I cannot tell you the amount of energy I was leaking, just like a leaky bucket. Like just energy was going everywhere by not acting on decisions that I didn't get to the part where you act. Like these are wishes and then, over analyzing and should I and whatever and this and that. And I'm telling you, like, it is so much easier just to make the decision and act on it just right away. Don't even think about it. Just trust yourself and see what happens. I think what you'll find is that you are trustworthy. You know what's going on with you. You are in fact, the only one who knows what's going on with you for real. And if you can get that centered in yourself and just start taking steps in that direction, like figuratively and literally taking steps in that direction, that is the direction that only you know what it is, you will be amazed. You will things will start to happen that you can't even believe. That's what I would say. Those two things.
That's a great way to wrap. That's a great way to wrap. Thank you so much, Heather, for
Amira,
joining
it's been a
me
pleasure.
and sharing all your stories. And I'm super, super proud of it's like every day you're on an exponential growth trajectory. And I love watching it. She's like, boom, 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 boom. So anyway, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
That's a wrap.
All right.
Hey, thanks so much for joining us and being part of the Unstoppable Woman movement. We have got a ton of free resources for scaling your business at theunstoppablewoman.com/free stuff. And you can find that link in the description below. So go ahead and check those out. And we'd also love your help in getting our message out to more and more women. If you'd be willing to share this video with all the unstoppable women in your life, that would be fantastic. And while you're at it, hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Reviews, likes, and comments are greatly appreciated. We go in and read them all. So thank you for those. And thanks for listening, and be unstoppable.